What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Just before we start, I wanted to announce that we're starting some Destiny 2 montage content on one of our other channels in preparation for the release of the game. And we're currently doing a giveaway for $300 worth of Battle.net credit to celebrate the launch of Destiny 2. If you win, you could use the credit to buy Destiny 2 itself, or maybe just buy Overwatch, Hearthstone packs, or anything you really want from Blizzard. So definitely check out the giveaway link in the description to enter, and as well check out our Destiny 2 channel at the link below. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. The meta is something that's often kind of solved by pro players and then emulated by the average player base in ranked, and that's why you tend to see a lot of new champions pop up in ranked play pretty soon after they've played in the LCS. It's a pretty natural part of the competitive ecosystem for a lot of games because the average players want to copy the pros, but it does have a pretty big drawback. Players often don't realize that a lot of success can be found by doing actually quite the opposite, and it's important to remember that the game in the ranked ladder system differs pretty fundamentally in a lot of ways compared to the pro LCS gameplay. So a lot of champions and strategies that kind of just fail completely against professional players can actually be quite powerful against less experienced and less coordinated ones. And today I wanted to take a look at some of these strategies, things that are going to be a lot stronger in SoloQ compared to how they might perform at the LCS level. Now the first thing I wanted to cover today is something you might be used to seeing in sort of grindy, long game metas, but they definitely disappear entirely when games are a lot more snowbally. And I'm talking about late game champions. Champions that are known for their ability to stall out and just become unstoppable powerhouses as the game goes on. Now Riot balances champions based on whether they are suited to fighting early or scaling up over time, and in a lot of scenarios, players opt for early game champions for the early game advantage in the laning phase and to potentially start a snowball to perhaps build an unsurmountable advantage that carries and closes out the game. Now this is actually a lot less powerful in SoloQ for one simple reason, and that's that players just aren't very good at closing out games as fast as they need to. This is definitely more of a problem the lower rank you are, but it can happen all the way from bronze to diamond, even in challenger to some extent. At the end of the day, playing SoloQ means a team of 5 random players are thrown together, and they just don't have the level of coordination and strategy that professional teams possess. Even if one team is just super far ahead of the other in SoloQ, games will pretty much always tend to drag on a lot longer than they otherwise would, because teams kind of struggle to play aggressively as a group and really just force objectives. As a result, late game champions have much more opportunity to scale up to hit that endgame fantasy, so whether they're on the losing or the winning team, they have a much better chance at closing out the game and reaching that peak performance level. Now this isn't something that happens or is too reliable for pro matches because late game champions often get targeted and really exploited for that early game weakness, and the games also get closed out pretty much as fast as they can, or at least very efficiently. A lack of organization is going to be a little bit of a recurring theme today, but it's definitely one of the key differences between professional and casual play. So our next strategy that I think is really overpowered in SoloQ that isn't so great in the LCS level is going to be invading. Although you do occasionally see invasion strategies being employed by pro teams in some metas, it's really just so insanely powerful in SoloQ because players are just a lot more disorganized. And also, of course, you have the issue of varying connection speeds or maybe people being AFK at the start of the match. For the attacking team, invading, all it takes is one player to suggest your team to group up and invade and just coordinate that fight, get all your teammates on board in champion select, and when you invade, you're pretty much always guaranteed to win a fight if you're the invading team, because the thing is that the defending team has to expect it, see it coming to be able to counter it, and that's something that doesn't really happen in SoloQ, or at least it doesn't really happen consistently. And even if you don't stumble upon the perfect 5v3 fight with the invade, you can really catch someone AFK or maybe just not paying attention all the time. And that is sometimes all it takes to get one of your players on the team a really significant advantage. But the same thing also applies to solo invades as well if you're playing as a strong early game jungler or maybe even as a mid laner who has a lot of assassin potential in the early game. Wandering into the enemy jungle to pick off their jungler can be a huge swing for your team's favor, get that early lead, take away the pressure from other lanes on your team, and get a major advantage. Now, it's always fun to see professionals like Faker, the god players, pull off some really insane plays with mechanically challenging champions, but it's also very important to remember that champion difficulty is not that big of a deal for pro players because they're kind of just good enough to play anything and everything. Now, this just is not the case for your average player, and picking complex champions leaves much more room for error because you have so many other things on top of what your champion does and your champion mechanics to keep track of. On the other hand, playing easy champions allows you to stay focused on the game a lot more, and you're just really not going to make as many mistakes because there's less room for you to. Riot doesn't typically balance champions to be more powerful just because they're more difficult to play, so playing easier champions is going to make it more likely for you to play that character to its maximum potential. Although you could make the argument that playing more skill-intensive champions is more fun, and definitely you should be putting what's fun first for you to do. If you're looking for a new champion to play and your goal is 100% to just climb the ladder, you're definitely going to find way more success by using easier champions and focusing on your overall macro play and your play as that specific role rather than trying to win through your champion mechanics alone. Champions like Annie, Maokai are great in this regard. They don't have complicated ability combos, all sorts of crazy things you need to do, but they pack everything you might need in that sort of kit, the point and click crowd control and all sorts of good stuff. And despite their simple playstyles, they're really consistently at positive win rates despite what the metagame looks like, and that's for good reason. It's not only the mid lane or jungle where you can exploit easier champions, of course. Every role has some simple but also powerful picks to choose from. For example, maybe Garen in the top lane, Warwick or Maokai of course in the jungle. All sorts of stuff for you to play, and definitely keep in mind when making the active decision to play a more difficult champion that it might introduce some new struggles for you. I would definitely recommend playing the easier champions for sure. Now, similar to invading, split pushing is another strategy that's typically more powerful in SoloQ compared to the LCS. Although split pushing does have a little bit of prominence in the LCS for sure, players in SoloQ really just have no idea whatsoever how to deal with split pushing, because it's actually not a very common strategy, and it's very easy to ignore or commit too many players to dealing with an enemy split pusher. A split pushing champion that actually has the tools to do so properly can really easily take down multiple towers or just break open the enemy base by sneaking an inhibitor. So it's a really powerful strategy if you have the right champion for sure. And definitely keep in mind that split pushing champions are great duelists as well, so if the enemy team only sends one player to deal with the split push, you can usually just pick up a free kill and continue split pushing anyway. There's a lot of risks attached to the split pushing strategy though that wouldn't necessarily take place at the LCS level, so definitely make sure that you have a good idea of when you should be treating or joining back up with your team rather than just constantly forcing the split push strategy and hoping it works out. It's also really important to keep in mind that in SoloQ your team has much less of an idea of how to play with a split pusher as well, so if you do plan to use this strategy, make sure you're communicating with your team before executing it. Also would recommend using maybe an easier champion in the previous tip if you are new to split pushing, because it can be kind of hard to focus on perfecting the strategy when you're playing a really mechanically intense champion. So champions like Tryndamere, maybe Master Yi are really good for learning to split push, and then maybe once you kind of get used to the strategy, you can start learning more complex characters like Fiora once you got the strategy down. Now, as we mentioned at the start, the meta is quite often figured out by pro players and then kind of just trickles down to the ranked queues for the LCS. Now, although champions can be off meta, pro players still understand their weaknesses and how to exploit or counter them, as a result, causing them to be not played very often. Now, in SoloQ, on the other hand, the advantage from playing a champion that people aren't used to playing against actually can go quite a long way. In some scenarios, this advantage is potentially big enough to be worth picking an off-meta champion over its popular meta counterpart. Now, this is pretty much never going to be the case in LCS play because, as we mentioned earlier, the LCS pros know how to counter every champion, and they know exactly why one champion might be meta or popular while another isn't. But it's a strategy you can definitely employ in SoloQ with a lot of success if you find the perfect champion to surprise people with. And this is something that works especially well with champions that you personally think are fun to play. Sometimes you can even come up with a champion that's maybe a hard counter to a popular meta hero. Learning that champion might set you up to have a lot of good games because you know the chances are good that you'll run into your counter pick. And while you maybe might know how to play against them, they're not going to know what to do against you. They're not going to know how to play against your off-meta champion. And that's the kind of advantage that can actually be quite powerful. And so as a result, gives off-meta, non-meta champions a great opportunity that you wouldn't otherwise have. Now our next strategy for today kind of ties into a little bit of the concepts with the previous one, and it's all about cheese. Now cheese strategies are really just all about being as unexpected as possible because the surprise factor is really powerful against SoloQ players who are simply just not used to or not expecting to deal with the strategies. And as a result, these types of things can be really good to use, and they can come in all sorts of forms, and you can maybe even just invent your own. The power comes from the random, unexpected nature of the strategy. For example, solo invades with a strong early game champion can really catch out a lot of junglers off guard, get you that fast kill and total control of the enemy jungler. There's also a lot of cheese strategies that maybe involve rushing early dragons, with champions that are strong at taking them in the first few minutes of the game. And although that might be less of an immediate power swing, over the course of the game definitely adds up to a big advantage. These strategies, of course, can also work outside of the jungle too. For example, there's quite a few champions that can rack up fast, unexpected kills in the first few minutes of the game. You know, there's all sorts of cheese stuff you can do. It's kind of a little bit of a general one compared to the others, but overall, it's definitely something that I would recommend doing if you can find a way to do it. Either way, that's just about going to wrap up our video of things that are going to be a lot stronger in SoloQ compared to the pro competitive LCS level. Again, definitely check out the giveaway in the link below at the description. And if you guys made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video or a dislike if you didn't, and I'll see you guys next time.